There's a kind of silence that hurts more than words. It doesn't shout, it doesn't argue. It just slowly creates distance between hearts that once felt inseparable. And sometimes that silence sits right inside a home between a 70-year-old parent and their own children. Let me begin with a small reflection. There was once an old man who used to sit every evening on a wooden chair outside his house. He would watch children play, birds return to nests, and the sun slowly disappear behind the horizon. One day, his grandson asked him, "Dadu, why do you always sit here alone?" The old man smiled and said, "I am not alone. I am waiting." "For whom?" the child asked. He paused for a moment and said something very quietly, "For my children, even though they don't know they've stopped coming." That line, even though they don't know, says everything. Because sometimes families don't drift apart suddenly. They drift apart silently through expectations that were never spoken out loud, but deeply felt. Today, let's talk about something very delicate. At 70, there are five silent expectations that can push your family away without you even realizing it. Not because you are wrong, not because they don't love you, but because expectations, when unspoken, slowly turn into emotional distance. Let's gently explore them. 1. The expectation of constant availability. There is a quiet ache that often grows in the hearts of many parents after 70. It doesn't come with noise, it doesn't announce itself. It simply sits in the background like an uninvited guest in the home. It sounds like this thought: I was always there for them, so why aren't they always here for me? Let me share a small story. An elderly man used to wake up every morning at 6 a.m. and sit by the window with his old radio. Every time the phone rang, he would quickly pick it up, hoping it was his son. Most days, it wasn't. One day, his neighbor asked him, "Why do you keep acting like this?" He smiled softly and said, "Because if I don't wait, I feel like I've stopped mattering." That line, "stopped mattering," carries a deep emotional truth. At 70, many parents don't just want attention, they want assurance that they still matter in the busy lives of their children. But here's where the silent expectation begins to create distance. In their heart, the parent feels, "I was available for every fever, every exam, every fear. I dropped everything for you, and now, when calls are missed or replies are delayed, it doesn't feel like delay anymore, it feels like emotional abandonment." But from the child's side, the reality is very different. They are not sitting in comfort ignoring love. They are running between responsibilities, deadlines, families of their own, emotional burnout, and survival. So, what happens? The parent feels neglected, the child feels guilty, and between them grows an invisible wall built not of anger but of misunderstanding. A son once said something heartbreaking: "My father doesn't understand that I am not ignoring him. I am just exhausted by everything I am trying to hold together." At this stage of life, availability cannot be demanded, it has to be invited. Because the moment availability becomes an expectation instead of a choice, it starts to feel like pressure. And pressure, even in love, slowly turns warmth into distance. True closeness at this age is not measured by frequency of contact. It is measured by the feeling. When we connect, it feels light, not heavy. Too. The expectation of being understood without explaining. There is a silent belief many parents carry after decades of raising children. They should know me by now. After all, how many years of love, sacrifice, and shared life should it take for someone to just understand without words? But life has a gentle truth that often surprises us. Even the deepest love is not mind reading. Let me tell you about a mother. She would often sit quietly in her room when her children visited. She wouldn't say much. She would smile, cook their favorite meals, and stay in the background. But after they left, she would cry. When asked why, she said, "They never ask me what I feel. If they loved me, they would know." But here's the difficult part: her children didn't know. Not because they didn't care, but because silence had replaced communication. At 70, emotional expression becomes even more important, not less. Yet many parents hesitate to express needs because they feel, if I have to say it, it doesn't feel like love anymore. But this is where misunderstanding grows. A son once said, "My mother expects me to understand her sadness without her ever telling me what's wrong. But I am not always able to guess it correctly. And then I feel like I am failing her." What begins as silence becomes assumption, and assumptions rarely get it right. Over time, both sides start feeling unseen. The parent feels ignored, the child feels inadequate, and slowly conversations reduce to logistics. Did you eat? Are you okay? Take care. But emotional depth disappears. The truth is simple but powerful. Love needs language, even in families. Because when feelings are not spoken, they do not disappear, they transform into distance. And sometimes the shortest bridge back to closeness is just five honest words. I am feeling lonely today. Not as blame, not as complaint, but as connection. Point 3. The expectation of priority over their entire life. Every parent carries a beautiful truth in their heart. My children are my world. But life quietly changes that equation for the children. They grow, they build their own worlds, and suddenly they are holding multiple lives together at once. At 70, many parents feel a painful shift. I am no longer the center of their life. And instead of accepting it, an expectation slowly forms. You should still choose me above everything else. Let me tell you a story. An elderly father once told his son, "You always seem busy. I think I am no longer important to you." The son paused and replied gently, "Abba, you are important, but you are not my only responsibility anymore. I have a family too, just like you once did." Silence followed. Not because of disagreement, but realization. When a parent expects to remain the highest priority in every phase of life, the child often feels trapped between love and guilt. And guilt is not sustainable fuel for relationships. A daughter once said, "I love my parents deeply, but every time I speak to them, I feel like I am failing both them and my life." This emotional conflict creates distance not because love is missing, but because balance is missing. True love at this stage understands, I am important in your life, but I am not your entire life. And surprisingly, when that understanding comes in, children often move closer, not farther, because they no longer feel torn. They feel allowed to love freely instead of fearfully. Love expands when it is not forced to shrink other parts of life. 4. The expectation that past sacrifices must be repaid. This is one of the deepest emotional truths of aging parents. After a lifetime of giving sleepless nights, sacrifices, missed desires, personal compromises, it is natural to feel, I gave everything, now I should receive the same in return. Let me tell you about an old woman. She once said, I gave up my dreams so my children could have theirs. Now I just want them to give me time. But slowly her expectation turned into disappointment. Because every missed call felt like repayment denied. Every short visit felt like emotional debt unpaid. But here is a truth life gently teaches us. Love is not a transaction ledger. Children are not emotional repayment plans. What you gave your children was never meant to come back to you in the same form. It was meant to become their strength, their stability, their foundation. A wise man once said, the fruit does not return to the tree that gave it life, but it carries its essence. When sacrifice becomes expectation, love becomes accounting, and accounting destroys softness. A son once shared, my mother often reminds me of everything she did for me. I feel grateful, but also emotionally distant because I feel like I am never enough. Gratitude grows in freedom, but it shrinks under obligation. At 70, peace comes when sacrifice is remembered with pride but not used as emotional currency. Because the greatest joy of giving is not repayment, it is knowing I gave with love and that is enough. 5. The expectation that change means disrespect, perhaps the most painful misunderstanding of all, is this. When my children change, it feels like they are leaving me. But change is not disappearance. Change is evolution. Let me tell you about a father and daughter. The father once said, you used to tell me everything. Now you barely talk. The daughter replied softly, Abba, I still love you. But my way of living, thinking, and handling emotions has changed. I didn't leave you, I just grew differently. That sentence is powerful. I didn't leave you, I grew differently. At 70, it can feel unsettling when children stop behaving exactly as they once did. But often, what feels like emotional distance is actually life expansion. New responsibilities, new emotional frameworks, new ways of coping with stress, they all reshape communication. And when parents interpret this as disrespect, they unknowingly push children further away. Because no one likes to feel misunderstood. A daughter once said, I stopped sharing because every change in me was seen as rejection of my parents. But change is not rejection, it is transformation. And love that cannot adapt to transformation slowly becomes heavy for the one carrying it. But when a parent says, I may not fully understand your new world, but I am willing to learn, something beautiful happens. The child doesn't move away, they move closer. Because acceptance is the language every generation understands. At 70, life is not asking you to love less. It is asking you to love with softer expectations and deeper understanding. Because sometimes love doesn't fade in families. It just becomes buried under expectations no one ever said out loud. And when those expectations are gently released, what returns is not just connection, it is peace. And peace, in the end, is the deepest form of family love.